Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today I wanted to do an update on a couple of stories about book banning because it's been a while and there have been a couple of topics that I wanted to discuss in this. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. If you would like to see me cover anything on the channel, be it an article or a reaction to some kind, as long as it's creativity or writing related or publishing related, submit it below. Or writing advice, I can't give you any surefire anything, but I can tell you my process or what I'm thinking about and how I get through things, and hopefully maybe that'll help you in your path. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel in some way, there are two ways to be featured. Number one is through the monthly prompt writing contest called Lemoy, where I give you a prompt. You guys answer it with a short story or a segment of some kind that fits the prompt, and then first Monday video of the month, we read it together here on the channel to just bask in everybody's creativity. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you've got a book out or a book coming out or a collection of books, you just submit your first chapter and your cover down in the description below for the Fresh Meat feature. They will be read here on the channel at a random interval. I can't tell you when they go up. I go in there, I randomly select one, and then they get read here. And hopefully that'll help more readers discover your book, because that is what I'm trying to do, to more objectively spread stuff out there that I may not ever read or may not be able to read or get to read because there's so much time in a day. And then the third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, the links are also down in the description below. You can get them at any of your favorite book places or the library, including the library. I hope you enjoy if you do check any of them out, but I know that they are also a taste. I say this. And I've read a story about a woman with a bass in the genitalia region. Anyway, let's just jump right into this, because there's stuff. There are shenanigans. And if you've been around the channel very much, you've already heard me talk about how I think the book banning stuff is being used to manipulate emotional responses, is being used to lie to people, and it's one of the reasons why here I am also doing the book reviews as I do on my channel for the top 10 most banned or challenged books as stated by the ALA. So that'll be the first thing I want to mention is Thursday, my first video of those came out, and it was for Beyond a Magenta by Susan Cucklin. Probably gonna be a mistake to do this series, to be honest with you, because it's mildly disconcerting, the kind of stuff that's on this. Stick around if you want to see me destroy my whole career by just talking about the books and what I see in them. And that said, there's also an update. This happened a little while ago at the end of March. Obviously, it's almost the end of April. It's middle of April, and I'm only just getting to this. Agatha Christie was the latest author to get a major sensitivity edit. There have actually been more since Agatha Christie was mentioned, but that just adds to the list where you're not safe if you're dead, you're not safe if you're alive, you're not safe if you're an author, and it just gives more reasons to avoid traditional publication, because you know that the traditional publishers do not have your story or your intent at heart. They have whatever it is they are editing this stuff for. I just want to mention this article briefly. It came out in March of 2021. Sir Kazuo Ishiguro warns of young authors self-censoring out of fear. So now it's true that theoretically, publishers don't force upon you sensitivity readers or sensitivity editing. You can, one, lose your deal with them if you don't edit things. Like your contract can just be canceled for insubordination or for whatever else, or for the morality clause, which morality clauses are pretty typical in contracts nowadays, where if you, for any reason, if there is a negative reaction to you and it could show up on the publisher's reputation, they have the ability to cancel your contract with little notice for as small as a tweet from a nameless account that was made a week ago. But this should also be concerned, but this should also be considered is the limitations of thought and the limitations of expression and the limitations of expression being forced through this method. That it's not just about forcing edits on authors that don't want to make them, or else their publication deal will be canceled. It has to do with limiting expression and limiting thought and and limiting experiences through either fear to conform or fear to never write something. I can't tell you how many writers or authors I've heard say, I'm afraid to write that thing because of the backlash that it could get. And it's not because of malicious intent, it's because of an emotional response. The same thing happens with talking about certain books or ideas. Even just discussing the ideas or the topics or the books on the top 10 banned book list is sketchy because of the emotional response that comes with discussing some of those topics. And it makes people worry about actually discussing those things in an honest way because it's made into a personal thing instead of being about talking about the book or the idea or the experience. So what was written in here, young authors may be self-censoring because they worry that they will be trolled or canceled, according to celebrated writer Sir Kazuo Ishiguro. Sir Kazuo, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2017, warned that a climate of fear was preventing some people from writing what they want. And I've heard some say this is ridiculous, and I've heard others say that's a good thing because if they're going to write bigotry, then they deserve to be fearful. So you're confirming that you're bullying people into not writing certain ideas that you don't like. That's all that I can say if that is your response. And you don't have to like it, but you don't have to bully people for writing what you don't like either. He said that they may be concerned that an anonymous lynch mob will turn up online and make their lives a misery. He told the BBC, I very much fear for the younger generation of writers. The 66-year-old said that he was worried that less established authors were self-censoring by avoiding writing from certain viewpoints or including characters outside of their immediate experiences. I think that this is a dangerous state of affairs, added the acclaimed author, whose works include The Remains of the Day and Never Let Go. He said that he was particularly troubled about young writers who rightly perhaps feel that their careers are more fragile, their reputations are more fragile, and that they don't want to take the risk. This is also fair because you see these mobs of emotional responses coming after debut authors or indie authors, but never really going after corporate entities, big writers, because they can't take them down. It is always bullying and isolating a smaller target, and usually a startup or an individual of some kind. It is very rarely about the big guys. It is not that it is never about the big guys, but you can't stop the big guys. So it just turns into bullying little guys into never being anything because you don't like what they have to say. His comments come after a number of freedom of speech disputes, with writers being canceled or facing threats of boycott for their work. High-profile targets have included J.K. Rowling, Julie Birchill, and Janine Cummins. Sir Kazuo, however, who received a knighthood in 2019, said that he was not worried about being canceled. I think I'm in a privileged and relatively protected position because I'm a very established author. I'm the age that I am. I have a reputation. Perhaps it's an illusion, but I think that I'm protected. In a career spanning 4 decades, he has written 8 novels and 1 book of short stories, combining critical acclaim with commercial success. I just want to mention, in 4 decades, 8 novels and 1 short story collection, that is insane considering that some people think that you have to be publishing 2 to 4 books a year in order to make it or be a real writer. It's not about the quantity, guys. The Remains of the Day won a Booker Prize in 1989 and was turned into a film starring Sir Anthony Hopkins and Dame Emma Thompson. It was nominated for 8 Oscars. Never Let Go, his dystopian drama about human clones whose organs are harvested for transplants, was adapted into the screen, featuring Keira Knightley, Carey Mulligan, and Andrew Garfield. And the author, who was born in Nagasaki, Japan, but moved to England when he was 5, insisted that there was no subject or viewpoint that he would shrink back from. Novelists should feel free to write from whichever viewpoint they wish and represent all kinds of views, he said. Right from an early age, I've written from the viewpoint of people very different from myself. My first novel was written from the point of view of a woman. A Pale View of Hills, which tells the story of a Japanese woman trying to deal with suicide of her daughter, made an immediate impact when it was published in 1982. I think that there are very valid parts of this argument about appropriation of a voice. He added, saying that he believes we do have an obligation to teach ourselves and to do research and to treat people with respect if we are going to have them featured in our work. He said that there must be a decency towards people outside of one's own immediate experience. But he said, if I shrink back from something, it's because I would doubt my ability to be able to learn enough about it to fairly write about it. But I tend to be quite arrogant about my ability to learn things if I put my mind to it. He has called for a more open discussion about cancel culture and freedom of speech. His new novel, Clara and the Sun, is published on Tuesday. It tells the story of a solar-powered robot that looks, behaves, and moves like a human and becomes an artificial friend to a teenage girl. I'm not going to go into the rest of AI because we don't need another AI discussion. And on this channel, I've got a couple of different videos on AI, and AI is not real life. So, there's that. The Guardian reported... These last couple of stories. The Guardian reported Judy Blume said book banning now is much worse than it was in the 1980s. And the 1980s, I'm pretty sure she's referring to the Satanic Panic. Quote, the author Judy Blume says a rise in intolerance in America has led to a much worse epidemic of book banning than she experienced in the 1980s. The children's and young adult author whose frank depictions of adolescence and puberty have long caused controversy said that it was time to fight back against the censorship. Her 1975 novel Forever, which deals with teenage sexuality, was one of the 80 books banned in one Florida school district last month for dealing with issues such as sex, race, and gender. I need to see. Was it age appropriate is the question. Well, we are reading one of the Toni Morrison books for this channel, so there is at least that. James Patterson's book. Okay, this is already garbage. So this says, in one Florida school district, libraries have removed books for sexual and racial content, some written by a very familiar names. Author James Patterson, Pulitzer Prize winner Toni Morrison, and best-selling young adult novelist Jodi Picoult are some of the writers whose work were among the more than 80 titles removed from the Martin County School District middle and high school last month. So number one, you can't mush these things together because I covered the James Patterson situation before, and James Patterson's books were pulled from an elementary school because they were for older teens. They were left available for older teens, but the words book banning is being used to derive a response, an emotional response, so that all that you think about is the removal of books as opposed to whether something is appropriate or not. There are books that are definitely not appropriate, and there is not a problem with removing them for not being age appropriate or for being venue appropriate. Would you have the Turner Diaries in school? Would you have Mein Kampf available for elementary school students? Would you have Might Makes Right available for elementary school students? Would you have Rage by Richard Bachman available for elementary school students? You got to think about these things. There is more to be considered than whether or not a book is available, and a book being available to a certain demographic through the state schools does not make you a banned author. And I hate that these phrases are being used so flippantly in order to create sales, marketing, and sympathy. Morrison's The Bluest Eye and Beloved have been on high school shelves, but no more. Books written by Picoult, including My Sister's Keeper, Lone Wolf, House Rules, and Keeping Faith, were also removed from high schools after objections that they were romance novels for adults, not children, according to district records. Well, if they are, can you blame them? All I know is that The Bluest Eye is going to include incest, rape, where a 9-year-old is raped by her father. That's going to be on the list to be read. Patterson, who had bestsellers eventually made into blockbuster movies, that doesn't give you more credibility. Calm down. Took to Twitter on Monday after learning his book, Maximum Ride young adult book series, was removed from Martin School Elementary School shelves. Like I told you before from the other article, which you can check out on this channel, they were removed from elementary school shelves because that book is actually made for older teenagers, but it was left for older teenagers. That is not a book banning. The response to having everything, when it's a curation of whether or not something is age appropriate is ridiculous. We need to be able to have these discussions about what books people should be able to read, about what books should be made available to students at what ages in these places is important. And shutting down any conversation about this stuff for the emotional reaction of it is always bad every single time is wrong. These books aren't no longer in print. They aren't completely unavailable. You can still learn in classrooms if they are available on the classroom, because this is saying they were removed from the libraries. And library books are the ones that you take and you go and read on your own without context. There are a lot of kids that have reported There are a lot of adults who have reported picking up pornography in their schools, their grade schools, their middle schools. 50 Shades of Grey is on the ALA's most banned or challenged book list. Why? Why is that in schools? We need to stop having this emotional response of an entitlement on Patterson's side here of having your book in a school and being like, well, I don't know why it's removed. Let's go back to Judy Blume here, huh? In an interview on the BBC's Sunday with Laura Kusenberg, Blume said the book banning, I thought that was over, frankly. I came through the 80s when the book banning was really at its height, and it was terrible, and then libraries and schools began to get policies in place, and we saw a falling off in the desire to censor books. Now it is back. It is much worse, and this is in America. It is back so much worse than it was in the 80s because it's become political. Children's stories have become the latest battleground in the culture war. When Puffin's books removed some of the more pejorative language from newer editions of Roald Dahl's work, it prompted backlash. Public outcry is not new to Blume. Are they like, I can't tell if they're criticizing this, but that's not censorship, but it is censorship to have a book banned. Book banned. Yeah, we're going to republish and then still call this Roald Dahl's work, and that's fine, but you can't have your book in a school, and that's not fine. Okay. Public outcry is not new to Blume. When her book, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, was released in 1970, its candid portrayal of puberty caused plenty of uproar and library bans. Even her own children's primary school refused to keep a copy. Is it age appropriate, is the question. Primary school may not be the place for it. Now, a screen adaptation of the book is to be released in May, starring Abby Ryder Forson, Rachel McAdams, and Kathy Bates. Having a movie doesn't make you more legitimate. That's just a way of going, I am better than the plebeians. Blume said she cried when she heard that she finally got to see her work made into a film 53 years later. Quote, I think it was my son who said to me, just wait until all those people who grew up with your books are in power in Hollywood, and you're going to see what happens. And I'm so glad that I'm around to see it. Blume's books have sold more than 90 million copies and have been translated into at least 32 languages. Asked if she was concerned about the intolerance in the US, Blume said, absolutely. Intolerance about everything, gender, sexuality, racism. That's not everything. If your definition of everything is gender, sexuality, and racism, expand. It's just reaching a point where, again, we have to fight back and we have to stand up and fight. She knows exactly what she's doing. Blume said that she was also worried about censorship in teaching. Florida introduced a bill last month that may limit discussions of menstruation before the 6th grade, and state governor Ron DeSantis is proposing to restrict conversations about gender identity and sexual orientation in schools. Honestly, I don't think schools should be in charge of discussing those things. Those things should be discussed with parents. It's traumatizing to discuss those sorts of things in front of your classmates and your peers that already want to make fun of you, and they're embarrassing. I don't think a school with stranger adults who are not related to you are the ones that should be telling you about sensitive things. But, you know, that's my hot take. I mean, that's crazy. That is so crazy, Blume said. And it's so frightening that I think the only answer is for us to speak out and really keep speaking out, or we are going to lose our way. I mean, there's a group of mothers now going around saying that they want to protect their children. Protect them from what? You know, protect them from talking about things. Protect them from knowing about things, because even if they don't let them read those books, their bodies are still going to change, and their feelings about their bodies are going to change, and you can't control that. They have to be able to read, to question. I have to wonder what the desperation is in some people to have children be reading books about sexuality and to expose children to sexuality. Like, what is this over-the-top desire and need to expose children to the stuff? What is driving it? Because this is not just about educating children. Why do you, Judy Blume, need to talk to children that are not yours about sex? It is not your job. And we need to more honestly approach these books, because they're not all just this blanket whatever. Like, this is pretending to be ignorant. Oh, they just don't want us to talk about things? They don't want us to talk about things? Why wouldn't they want us to talk about things? Recently, I saw this going around. Graphic novel based on Anne Frank's diary removed from Florida high schools. Of course, you see the comments on social media saying, I can't believe that they are erasing Anne Frank. They're not talking about Anne Frank. Well, Get further down here, claiming it's minimizing the Holocaust. Let's go. Anne Frank's Diary, the graphic adaptation, was removed from a library at Vero Beach High School after a leader of Moms for Liberty in Indiana River County raised an objection. The school principal agreed with the objection, and the book was removed last month. The book, at one point, shows the protagonist walking in a park, enchanted by female nude statues, and later proposing to a friend that they show each other their breasts. I'm just saying, not everything is equal. And there are certain things that you do not get a pass on. And sometimes it even feels like things are being used as a shield for other things because they've got buzzwords. Like, all people are going to see in the headline is Anne Frank's Diary was removed. Go to, oh, they're anti-Semitic, and not read, oh, hey, maybe it was the subjection of nudity in the story where it's not necessary for the storytelling. And then we're going to claim, oh, what is the problem here? Why don't you want to talk about the Nazis? It's not about Anne Frank. There are plenty of stories in regards to Anne Frank that do not have this. So can we be honest for a second here? Because my guys, we need to stop with the lying. You're not building your own credibility with just another. First it's Judy Blume, and then we got over here with Jodi Picoult, because she was also mentioned, denounces book bans after Florida school district pulls 20 of her titles from the shelves. Number one, you don't have an entitlement to the shelves. The parents get to decide what they shelve because they are paid by the taxpayers. I'm sorry if you don't like it, but that is how it is. If that is not your district, tough. Go and determine in your district. But I can't look at this as anything other than marketing because number one, you say you're banned, so now you are victimized. And number two, that's dollars that you just lost because that school is not carrying your book at the same extent that it was before. Anyway, excuse me for being a bit doubtful. According to a new report from the American Liberty Association, attempted book bannings and restrictions at schools and public libraries set a record in 2022. Maybe people should stop trying to shove porn into schools. That's all I'm saying. With more than 1,200 challenges, nearly double that total from 2021, which we're going to go through the 2021 books and maybe go through the 2022 books when that list is put up. Florida passed a new law last year to review reading materials made available in classroom, and the state's Martin County recently announced the removal of 92 books from its school. Why are they picking on Martin County specifically? All of these are talking about Martin County. 20 of those books were written by best-selling author Jodi Picoult. She sat down with ABC News' Gio Benitez and Kanya Whiteworth on a GMA3 to discuss what happened in her tour books in Martin County and what she believes is driving book bans nationwide. You say that you've had your books banned before, but never 20 at once. Jodi, nope. Why do you think your books were getting banned, especially there in Florida? Jodi, that's an excellent question, but unfortunately in Martin County, Florida, and in many places in Florida, one parent can decide to pull books from the shelf without even giving a reason for that. And that one parent who wanted to ban all 20 of my books said on her form that she had not read the books. She admitted to that. And she said that some of them were adult romances, which is really interesting because I don't write adult romance. And in fact, half of the books that she pulled do not even have a single kiss in them. But they do have topics like gun rights and women's reproductive health rights and gay rights and things like that. So number one, she's admitting that this is political. Her books are politically charged. But how many times do you think that she would have advocated for things that she has never read before either? Benitez, because all of your books are very topical. Oh, see, they even admit. So this is very about political books in the library. How would you feel about books that were pro-gun in the library or were pro-traditional woman roles or were anti-gay? How would you feel about those? Just put that into perspective. Or a bunch of Christian books only, or like, think about it. Think about it. Not everything needs to be politicized, is all I'm saying. Picoult. Yeah, so they're books that are to encourage children to think for themselves. They're at a high school library. It's worth saying that. This is not an elementary school library. And the modus operandi is to get the books pulled off of the shelves because the process for review is very muddy. That seems like an assumption. And also maybe it has nothing to do with people thinking for themselves and has more to do with we don't want our tax dollars going to this. because that's where those books come from. And so the books stay off the shelves away from the kids until they actually manage to figure out a way to review them. They can go to the public library and pick up your books too. There are some libraries in Florida, actually, school libraries, where they have not had any books in elementary school libraries since Christmas. Kanya, Whitworth, and you said that you've had two more pulled off the shelves. Yes, just this weekend. And when you're talking about adult romances, you say that's not what I'm writing. Even your book, The Storyteller, is about the Holocaust. Why do they always go for the same things? It's the same defenses. That is correct. Yeah, that was the one that really shocked me in Martin County, because it's a book about fascism and the rise of fascism and how ordinary people can play into that. And it felt very ironic to have a book about the Holocaust banned. You know, it's a story for people whose stories can't be told, and that's the reason that we need books like this on the shelf. Maybe it's because she said she doesn't write adult romances, but The Storyteller is considered an adult fiction novel. And then looking at this review, I think it is slightly unsavory to use one of the most devastating horrors in recent memory as a backdrop to a silly love story. It starts with Sage and ends with Sage, so Auschwitz is a bit part. If you're going to use something so emotionally charged, then you have to rise to it. So it sounds like a love story is a fairly large part of that story. So going, well, it's not an adult romance. Okay, but it is an adult book with a love story in it, so maybe it wasn't appropriate for the high school. Just saying. I don't feel like this conversation is being had in good faith, and we're being lied to in a lot of ways to try to weasel around what is actually being objected to by using emotionally charged words. But let me know what you think in the comments down below, especially if you've read any of these books, because I have not read any of Judy's books. I have not read any of Jodi's books. But it says, so I want to show this moment from last week. This was at a Martin County School board meeting of this 100-year-old World War II widow, and she spoke out against these book bans. Okay, the moment went viral, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. 100-year-old widow said, one of the freedoms that the Nazis crushed was the freedom to read books that they banned. They stopped free press, banned the burned books, and the freedom to read, which is protected by the First Amendment, is our essential right and duty of our democracy. Yes, but that is not happening. Removing a book from a school is not the same as burning books. And this conflation of it, of if you don't have a book in the library at school, specifically, it's not like any of the libraries in the county. It is only the specific school. The conflation of this makes this seem dishonest. And if we want to have an honest conversation about whether or not something deserves or should be in a school library, then we need to use exact language. It's not semantics. It is, what are you arguing for? Because you're sloppily using words in order to put book banning on, or book burning on a larger scale to mean the same thing as removing a sexually driven book from a school. Whitworth said, especially at a time when we're setting record book bans. So keep this in mind. There is a new report from the American Library Association attempting book bannings and restrictions at school and public libraries actually set a record in 2022 with more than 1,200 challenges. So to put that into perspective for you, it was nearly double that total from 2021. So what do you think is driving the nationwide idea? We will find out. But based on the first two books from 2021 that I've read, yeah, I would say non-age appropriate content is a heavily influential thing right now. And pretending that there is no problem with what is being submitted into schools is a lie. Pickholt says, I think it is a very small, very vocal group of people who are speaking out. The vast majority of folks in this country know that we should not be banning books, that we should not be restricting what kids are reading. We should be restricting what kids are reading. Children do not need to read things that will emotionally scar them. Kids do not need carte blanche to adult content. Is that so hard to understand? Because this is really dubious. You know, especially at a high school level, I think that is unfortunate. The minority is much larger than the majority, and so we all really need to take a stand. You can't listen to the politicians when they say these aren't bans, it's a hoax. I'm an author. 20 of my books were pulled from the shelves in one particular school district. That is not a hoax, that is a ban. And it really is important that right now we all speak out against this, because we've seen historically what happens when we do not. Okay, gonna go back to this list. Sexually explicit images, sexually explicit, sexually explicit, sexually explicit. Challenge for profanity violence because it was thought to promote anti-police messaging and indoctrination of a social agenda. Profanity, sexual references, derogatory terms. Sexually explicit, degrading to women. Sexually explicit, depicts child sexual abuse. Sexual education and LGBT content. Sexually explicit LGBT content. Well, looking at this infographic, I'm not seeing what age groups these were pulled out of. That's interesting, ain't it? Five types of book censorship in 2018. Vandalizing pages, hiding resources, requiring parental permission to access content is considered censorship. They're saying let parents make decisions, and then considering a parent saying, I don't want you to read that, to be censorship. Removing materials. So you're not ever allowed to have any opinions whatsoever, to do anything. You just have to permiss everything, apparently. Look, this is obviously a contentious issue with a lot of nuance in it that is not being had, because everything is being turned into this is just being banned, everything is Nazis, and it's always going back to specific certain terms to try to elicit an emotional response to make you immediately defensive instead of looking over the materials. This is why I'm doing the top 10 list on my channel, where I'm going to go over the top 10 books from 2021 and maybe 2022, because this needs to stop. This emotional manipulation, and the emotional manipulation and the lies and the hiding of pornography and inappropriate things just to do an all-out blanket, this is banning and you're not allowed to do this and you're not allowed to have a say. But me, the author, because I've had movies, can say what you are allowed to choose for your children in a place that I don't live. Look, I don't want to be this guy. I want to be able to have this conversation and to be honest and to be able to talk about this stuff. Can we be reasonable? Can we stop lying long enough to have an honest discussion about this stuff? Or is it just too late? Is it just everything and anything must be permissible, or else it's a banning? I can also say I don't necessarily disagree with burning books that you personally didn't enjoy. I've suffered. Have you? I have thrown books in the garbage because it would have made me a bad person to donate them and put that, like, voice that into somebody else. But that's me. You do with the books that you didn't enjoy whatever you gotta do. But I could not in good conscience sleep by passing certain. Maybe that shows my hand a little bit. I would love to know your thoughts on the book banning, on these articles, on any of the books listed here, if you've read any of them, and just on the way that book banning is being used in the media, especially to demonize Florida and especially to demonize Martin County, apparently. I can't help that it feels like bullying. I can't help that it feels so dishonest. Does it feel dishonest to you? Is this an overreaction from the school district side? What do you think is going on? Why do you think that so many terms are just being changed into, are being used interchangeably, or do you think that they're not being used interchangeably at all? I have opinions, obviously, but I'm also trying to be as fair as possible, while also having my opinions and understanding that I have my own position. Let's try to get along on this. I hope we can actually have a discussion in the comments on this, because just the language being used constantly in these, I've been covering this for a couple of months now, and the constant same linguistic games are so incredibly annoying to me. I just want to have a real conversation about this stuff, but it doesn't seem possible. But let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend. And don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross.
Is he in trouble?
We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Way. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, You chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?